What's up, everybody? How's it going? Anthony Cosenza here with John Sheeran talking some Bengals football. Bengals took one on the chin, figuratively, literally everything last week. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And, of course, what's ahead and what has become one of the ultimate rivalries in the NFL, at least over the past 2-3 years, in the Bengals and the Chiefs taking place on New Year's Eve. I hope everybody had a great Christmas, a great Hanukkah, whatever you may or may not be celebrating. Hope you are having a great time of year. A belated Merry Christmas to you, my friend John, and hope you're doing well, man.
Yeah, happy late Christmas to you as well, Anthony, and to your family and everyone, and the Cosenza family and the Sheeran family. Merry Christmas all around. Yeah, my mom's a big Steelers fan, so her Christmas went a little bit better.
That's right. Yeah,
I
remember you telling us that.
She didn't have the greatest week last week, so I'm happy that the Steelers kind of gave her that. But you know what? At the end of the day, when a guy named Rudolph is starting against you 2 nights before Christmas, I mean, what are you gonna do, right? It's written in the stars, you know. It wasn't that foggy, I guess, in Pittsburgh, but
I like what you did there. Yeah, Your mother, as a Steelers fan, must have had quite the emotional roller coaster of the last 5 weeks, right? It's two big wins over the Bengals, sandwiched around 3 straight losses, right? And you know, I mean, when you look at the disparity of the rosters, and we'll get more into this in a little bit, you kind of felt like, okay, well, the Bengals, and a lot of people were saying the same, the Bengals should win this game. Quarterback issues, all that kind of stuff. But there was just this lingering feeling, at least that I had, where you're really going to get the Steelers to lose 4 straight, and you're going to get them to do that at home, and you're going to get them to do that with their playoff life barely having a heartbeat left. I just didn't see it occurring for the Bengals in that regard. But, you know, the Bengals were winners of 3 straight. Were they going to keep that rolling? It's so hard to win 4 straight in the NFL. We know that. So it was 2 teams trending in different directions, and one just completely flipped the script on the other. Bengals fall to 8-7, and they have 2 critical games coming up here. Basically, more or less have to win both of them, maybe even get some help. There's all kinds of weird scenarios out there because of the quarterback attrition across the league. A lot of the AFC teams cannibalizing each other and trying to fight their way back into things here. So we'll talk about all that. But I'm Anthony. He's John. If you are new here, welcome. We appreciate it. We've got a lot of people watching us on a number of different platforms. We've started to restream to a couple of different Twitter accounts, so you can check it out there. Of course, our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to by clicking the show icon underneath John Sheeran and that Cincy Jungle icon on his side of the page there. Click that, as well as the bell to be notified when we go live and when new content is available. You can also get this show and the others on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, which include 3 and Out from Jason and Kevin, the great work from the coach, Matt Minnick, and Talking Football with Bengal Jim and friends. They just had Yoshi on the show this week, so you got to go check out that. And I watched a bit of that. That was a really fun interview. He's got $1 million smile, really engaging personality. Seems like a really, really good guy. So go check out that. And it's on your favorite audio streamers: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon, all the ones. Go get it. All right. So, hey, hi, we're seeing a lot of hellos across the platforms. Here we go. Hi, guys, from Andrew on Twitter. Chris saying good evening, AC and John from Facebook. And, of course, Mark saying what's up. All right. So I talked about this on the post-game show. And for those, I want to give a tip of the cap and make sure that we note for you to go and check out the article that was done shortly after the Bengals loss to the Steelers by Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic. Go get yourself behind that paywall and subscribe to The Athletic and get some great stuff that he puts out there. But there was a lot of talk about the physicality and what a difference a week makes, John Sharon, because against the Minnesota Vikings, there was a moment in that game where you go, there's the physicality you need as a team. There's the tenacity, the intensity that you need. And that was on display twice in that game. The 4th and 1 stop by the Bengals late in the game. Twice, a 3rd and 1 and a 4th and 1 stop that got him the ball back. And Joe Mixon rolling over Ivan Pace into the end zone when he got stuck. They met in the hole and he just, plowed forward over him. And you go, there it is. And what a difference a week makes, because 1 week later against the Pittsburgh Steelers, you saw them just throttling the Bengals all over the field. None more obvious, and I hate to point out one player, but none more obvious than Jaylen Warren just taking it to Jermaine Pratt at the end zone. And so here we are again. I'll have to pull up the records, but I think it's something to the effect of 12-32 since 2003. And this has been the most competitive stretch of Bengals football pretty much ever, at least for a lengthy period of time, 2003 through 2023. 12-32, 2 postseason losses, a lot of lopsided losses. And here is one again when the stakes are very, very high, John. And so in that article with Paul Dehner Jr., there was a lot of quotes about physicality, lack of physicality. And I contended that the Bengals needed to really be hyped, not to look forward to the offseason quite yet fully, but this offseason has to be not so much let's obsess over the Chiefs, let's obsess over the Bills. It has to be what's happening in our backyard. How do we take care of business in our backyard? And so that is where I am. I know the Bengals are on the heels of 2 division titles, but this year has shown a lot of problems for the Bengals in this division.
Right. I think the important thing here in this discussion is to not lean so far one way or the other, because in 2021, it was the best of both worlds. The word finesse is now getting thrown around in the comments section from Les Hernandez. Hello from Louisiana. I remember the days leading up to the Tennessee Titans divisional playoff game when a lot of Titans fans I don't know, the Bengals seem like a finesse team. And that obviously wasn't the case, because they had great success against AFC North teams that season. And in general, their defense was incredibly physical, and it was physical enough to match up against the run-first team that the Derrick Henry Titans were that season when they were the 1 seed, right? They took a lot of people by surprise. Their defense was really the engine that carried them to the Super Bowl that year. But on offense, they were still a high-powered machine with obviously Burrow and Chase connecting for 1,400 yards, Higgins as the best number 2 receiver in the NFL, just an electric passing game. And we saw that at the end of the 2022 season, too, when the defense was still, at its core pretty physical, and it was able to match up with basically any team that they could, while also shutting down, the elite quarterbacks of the league. We've seen a lot of personnel changes this year, and obviously injuries have kind of impacted that as well, specifically in this past game where the Steelers haven't changed at all in the past 20 years. They're basically still the same team with just different faces and different numbers. The Bengals have changed a decent amount, though, this past year. And I think on both sides of the ball, you've seen the offensive line prioritize getting just big bodies that can pass protect. But even then, they're still very average at best in that regard, and they get very minimal push in the run game, which is where you see a lot of the inconsistencies with the run game as a whole. And it's not as scheme diverse as you'd like it to be. And then we really did see the loss of DJ Reader in its full effect in this game, because you have Zach Carter just not being the player that they need him to be entering now year 3 or going on year 3. Josh Tupou doesn't look like anywhere near what he was in his best days as a Bengal, which was a few years ago, so he's probably out the door. You've had inconsistent linebacker play from, like you said, Jermaine Pratt, and also Logan Wilson, who's had his moments, but I think it's been kind of a down year for both those guys. And really just the cornerback play in terms of in run defense. DJ Turner is obviously not a very big guy. He's never going to really be an asset in that regard. I think you're seeing kind of a shell of who Chidobe Awuzie is nowadays, just coming off of that ACL injury. Now he's getting up, he's pushing 30 years old, and he's going to be a free agent. And then the inconsistencies at safety, like Dax Hill, again, not the biggest guy. He's never really going to be that much of an asset and run defense. You don't have 10 Mike Hildens out there running around. Like, one Mike Hilden is a great guy to have, but you need more of them, honestly, for when you have a secondary that's kind of built like this. So it's been a lot of, obviously attrition and personnel changes that have kind of led to performances like this. I don't think the Bengals necessarily are soft, but they're not as good of a tackling team as they used to be. They don't really hit guys as hard. It seems like they kind of carry guys like a couple yards down the field and then maybe bring them down. But when you have a motivated, fired up Steelers team that's sick of the noise and sick of people counting them out, and then at their home stadium, it's just a recipe for kind of what we saw. So yeah, I think in general the Bengals maybe are not as physical as they should be, and that needs to be an emphasis. But it's not like we need to turn the clock back all the way to the 2000s and just forget what the identity of the Bengals is, which is still a very pass-first team that needs to prioritize, stopping the best quarterbacks in the league.
Look, the counter argument that I heard and everybody that the Bengals they just won 2 division titles, man. What are you talking about? In 21 they were, they had swept the Steelers, and I mean I get it. I get it. And that doesn't go unnoticed. But my point is, in this moment and against this specific team, now the Bengals have a losing record overall as a franchise against the Ravens, but I think the disparity in the history there is like 4 games overall in the record. So it's pretty close. And then the Bengals and the Browns are pretty close as well. I don't have that in front of me. Probably should, but I mean, we know that the Bengals under Marvin Lewis, they had the Battle of Ohio kind of in their favor. It's probably around evenish right now. So, I mean, that's where you need to keep it. But when you're talking about a massive disparity between particularly this one franchise, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and in a moment when they are reeling as a team, supposedly, with their third quarterback starting a game for them, they have injuries on their side of the ball. No Mika Fitzpatrick. No Kazee because he's suspended. You have Patrick Peterson, and a guy who's played cornerback forever is now your emergency safety. No, by the way, he gets the red zone interception of all different players that it could be. It's him that gets it. I just have a problem with the lack. I don't want to call it a lack of intensity or whatever, but the disparity of intensity, the disparity of physicality in that moment against this team. And you hear, oh, well, we have a physicality problem. How often have we heard that, John, about this particular rivalry? It's always the Steelers out muscling, out physicaling. And look, you mentioned a lot of things on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, DJ Reader is missed. Of course, they've had a lot of other injuries, CTB being out of the lineup and other guys in and out. But I also look at that safety position. You lost Von Bell. There's a physical presence there. We all know just a few years ago what he did to Juju on primetime TV. You lost him. And then, you talk about the linebackers maybe taking a step back this year. I think a lot of that is, we heard so much about Jesse Bates and Von Bell lining up, guys in front of them on defense and making sure guys were in good places. And when you lose both of those guys in the offseason, it hurts you. It hurts you for sure. But I also look at the offensive side of the ball too, John. I mean, you look at the Bengals offensive line, TJ Watt's a great player, but you still cannot figure out some form of an answer to not allow 2 sacks, a pass deflection, and turnovers galore from that guy almost every single game you play him. It's the same thing with Myles Garrett. At some point, figure it out. And you need to have answers for these types of problems that are recurring problems. Now, these are generational players. I get it, but it gets maddening to hear, well, we still have a physicality problem. Fix it. I mean, it's easier said than done, but obsess over getting it fixed and work your way back into the AFC North. You are 0-5 in the AFC North. You have 3 road losses that are all blowout losses this year. And I don't know how promising Week 18 looks against the Browns because somehow Joe Flacco's getting it done and that defense is doing their thing.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns' defense is legit, and their defensive coordinator is legit as well. It sucks that in 2 Steelers games this year, the quarterback hasn't played. It's probably It's probably a factor that we should probably discuss. It's by far, Jake Brownings's 2 worst games are against the same team,
of course.
And this game in particular, giving up the huge play to George Pickens, which was just a bad angle from Dax Hill, tackling DJ Turner right at the catch point, and then it's just Pickens in his 4.4 speed taking off the races. Put the offense in a hole early on, albeit the offense did punt on the first possession. Last week was great against the Vikings when Jake Browning led a comeback in the fourth quarter, but the 49ers are kind of going through this right now as well. When you're behind and the game script changes, how much can you rely on your quarterback to dig you out of that? Is he going to do too much? Is he going to try to play hero ball? Is he going to throw into triple coverage in the end zone when he should be just throwing it away in the sidelines? That's the dilemma right now when you have a quarterback like Jake Browning. And I think when your quarterback just kind of implodes like that from trying to do too much, it does take an effect on the rest of the team. Because honestly, the Bengals have been better than the Steelers when Joe Burrow's been out there. Like the first loss I can think of is obviously when their long snapper got hurt and Burrow led the game-winning touchdown drive. And of course went to overtime because they missed the extra point, but they swept him in 2021. They beat him the second time in 2022. They did that without Jamar Chase, by the way, at Heinz Field. So like I think in general, just when you separate the pre-Burrow era and the Burrow era now, I think the Bengals have had the upper hand. Fortunately, this team, like, it had Jake Browning at quarterback, and he can't handle the Steelers' defense because it's still a very capable and great unit, especially with that pass rush. And, like, I think the base of the team is still pass first, but when you don't have that consistent run game that you can rely on, every team does need that. You can't survive the NFL without at least somewhat of a competent rushing attack. And it's just so sporadic, really, because of this offensive line, and it's just mismatched, and it's not coherent with the scheme that they want, and they just can't just pound the ball down the middle of any team that they want. It's almost entirely matchup based. So again, you have the whole conversation of why didn't they run the ball more? Well, they couldn't run the ball in general, which is the same issue that they ran into last time they played the Steelers again. So that's another aspect of this. When you don't have any sort of consistency that you can just fall back on and just help out your quarterback, that's a huge issue too. So I think morale was a little bit low when they saw Browning trying to press and they got into that hole really quick, and it was just Steelers just kind of capitalizing off of that. But again, I think the turnover on defense has definitely led to some of these issues. It led to just immense tackling issues early on in the season, which eventually got a little bit better as the season went on. But I think the morale impact is still an underrated aspect of this, that when your quarterback does play that badly, there's almost really just nothing that your team can do.
Nothing that your team can do. That is for sure. I'm trying to look up the exact numbers that I had here. Yeah, 12-32 the last 20 years, and 70-39 all time in this rivalry. So 70 wins, 39 losses for the Steelers against the Bengals all time, and 32-12 has been the record against the Bengals by the Steelers in this, with many. How many of these are primetime games? How many of these are both teams are in the playoffs? And in the disparity of the score, the disparity of the intensity, that's what bothers me. And you can obviously, you are correct with some early mistakes by the quarterback and just the team allowing big plays. You kind of felt those waves of momentum just getting crashing on them, right? I mean, it happened, but I just. At some point, you keep having these same or very similar issues, and it's maddening. And then you hear, the quotes at the end of the game. Well, there's a physicality issue, and it's just been happening for a very long time. So I would like to see them fixed. What I want to ask you though is, okay, so we've talked about how much the safeties, losing them, and that's not a knock on the guys necessarily. Dax was a first round pick for a reason. Jordan Battle's been playing, some good ball of late, but there's been some, we talked about the bad angle by Hill on that Pickens play. DJ Turner's had some really good moments this year, and then he had some bad moments the last couple of weeks. How confident are you that guys like that, your Jordan Battles, your Dax Hill, your DJ Turners, are going to start to, in year two, have kind of what we saw, or what Cam Taylor-Britt did this year? And granted, he's been out for about a month here, but he was playing some very good football for the most part this year. I mean, are you confident that group, maybe in year two as starters, year three overall for Dax Hill, are you confident that they're going to take a similar leap, and that maybe that in itself remedies the physicality issue?
So I think with Taylor-Britt, like, he was a great combination of both physicality and speed and just size in general, right? Like, he's got the length to match up with any. Like, they needed him so badly against George Pickens because Awuzie didn't have the speed to match up against Pickens, and Turner doesn't have the size to match up against Pickens. Taylor Britt has both. That's why he bullied the crap out of DK Metcalf 2 months ago, right? So he's
Mm-hmm.
so integral to this entire secondary. But it is, in my opinion, like the development of all three of those guys, Turner, Battle, and Hill. I would kind of consider Hill a rookie because this is his first year actually playing like anything significantly. But having all three of those guys take it doesn't have to be a Taylor Britt leap, because Taylor Britt, if he was healthy for the last 4 weeks, he's probably in the conversation for the Pro Bowl. They don't need him. They don't need all three of those guys to be Pro Bowlers necessarily, but the consistency needs to be rounded out incredibly. I think with Turner, he kind of hit the rookie wall because he started off the year pretty well, and it is still a really hard position to translate immediately into the NFL. But I don't think some of his issues are ever really going to go away necessarily. Like, he's still got 30-inch arms, which I think was the main cause for him giving up that touchdown last week against Jordan Addison. He's never going to be that dominant guy at the catch point, knocking deep balls away unless his timing is perfectly. And that can get better the more reps that he gets. And he'll always have that speed enough to catch up to those deep balls. But that's always going to be an issue for him, I think. With Battle, he's never going to be as fast as Dax Hill. He's never going to be that rangy guy. So the way that they can utilize him outside of just as a box safety or as a cover 2 safety, as a 2 deep shell safety, it's always going to be kind of limited, which means that they aren't able to always have Dax Hill close to the line of scrimmage or in the slot, which is where he played for the most part in college. Like, they need him back there as a rangy, deep safety, because he's the only guy with the range to do that. Like, Nick Scott has that range, but obviously he proved to just be a liability in that regard, and just really any regard where he's been on the field. That's why Mike Hilton has been a safety for like a handful of snaps a game, just because they want a guy with experience and range back there so they can have Dax Hill do other things closer to the line. So all three of those guys just maximizing what they can do with their skill sets, and just more experience definitely helps too. But they need all three of those guys to play more consistently next year, because the secondary and the miscommunication and just being out of the wrong spots, and just from a lack of experience, it's killed this team in a lot of ways, just like their deficiencies up front. And obviously defensive tackle is a huge issue on its own, but yeah, the secondary needs to be a lot better next year.
Well, they need to be better across the board. This defense has been a bit disappointing in a lot of different respects. There's been a lot of growing pains. There's been some flashes of good stuff too from the new players back there. No doubt about it. But pass rush, aside from Trey Hendrickson, it's been a little bit of an issue. You're starting to see some good stuff from Miles there the past few weeks. But Joseph Asai, totally MIA. Cam Sample, he'll give you something here and there in rotational duty, but they really need some additional help there. Hubbard, you usually rely on him for 8+ sacks a year, and there's been a little bit of a dip, I think, there too. So I just, they need to kind of just figure out a lot of different things on that side of the ball, because it's been a lot worse this year than it has been in prior years for sure. But the Bengals get a little bit of good news, and we'll talk about the Chiefs specifically in a minute, but the Bengals got a little bit of some good news in a way, with two of their stars who missed last week. We just talked about one in Cam Taylor Britt. So as of Wednesday, the 27th, he went full in practice, and I believe Jamar Chase went through a walkthrough with his shoulder injury there. So that I don't know exactly what that means for Chase, but things are looking up for Cam Taylor Britt to potentially, take the field this week and give it a go.
Yeah, fortunately that was the expectation. He suffered an ankle injury in the days leading up to the first. I want to say it was the Jags game, I think, when they were practicing leading up to that week. They put him on IR, but they felt pretty confident that he would not need the full 4 weeks to recover. So he may have been able to play last week, which is why he's able to practice right now. And he was immediately cleared, and he was immediately on the practice field. So it was like a 2-3 week injury for him in his ankle. And we should see 100% of Cam Taylor Britt out on the field Sunday in Kansas City. With Chase, like, the reports initially were he's definitely going to miss 1 week. He may miss 2, which to me paints in as potentially a game time decision. I would guess he practices in some capacity Friday, which opens that conversation and probably gives him the questionable label. Again, that's just projection. This is Wednesday when we're recording this, but they do have a walkthrough Wednesday morning. Then Zach Taylor speaks, and they have their actual practice. So Chase was wearing the GPS tracker on his chest, and he had cleats on, but he wasn't in uniform or a helmet. He was just doing some just light catching drills on the rehab field. I think he's trying to minimize how much pressure and stress is on that right shoulder. Again, he had an AC joint sprain, suffered against the Vikings not even 2 weeks ago. It's typically an injury that requires you to miss maybe 2 weeks or maybe more, depending on the severity. But this is an injury that I would expect him to try and play through this week, but he's got to get on the practice field at least once.
Yeah, and then you see the list here on Cincy Jungle, the list for injured Bengals on the report. Pretty low, though, as we mentioned. They lost DJ Reader and DJ Ivy for the year a week prior against the Vikings, along with a number of different injuries just in that game there. But only Jamar Chase, Jalen Davis, Cam Sample, and Cam Taylor-Britt, with Chase being the only one who did not practice Wednesday. But as we mentioned, he was kind of doing some stuff. The others were limited, and of course, Cam Taylor-Britt was full. Then you look down here for the Chiefs, and you got corner L'Jarius Sneed did not practice, and then illness from Jalen Watson. Boy, do I know what that's like this month. Did not practice. Isaiah Pacheco with the concussion and shoulder injury, he did not practice. Neither did Donovan Smith, an offensive tackle, and Kadarius Toney with a hip problem. Toney with his hands this year, I mean, I don't know that I mean, I know there's a lot of people unhappy with Toney. I'm not going to make a snide comment because I'm not playing in the NFL, but I know there are a lot of people, Chiefs faithful, that are not pleased with Kadarius Toney this year. And then you've got Trey Smith, the guard, with going limited with ankle and knee issues. Nick Bolton, the linebacker, went full the rest of the way, but a lot of guys listed, including Trent McDuffie, the former first-round pick at corner, having a shoulder issue, etc. So a lot of guys listed, but about half of the guys listed did practice full as of Wednesday for the Chiefs.
Yeah. With Pacheco, I think his helmet came off like 2 separate plays within like 4 plays of each other, both when he had the ball, and it came off and as he was going to the ground, and I think he took like a knee right to the head, and I don't think he finished that game against the Raiders. So in this game specifically, though, I mean, we can talk about the Chiefs in general, but like with how much the Bengals are struggling right now stopping the run, with their defensive tackle issues and their lack of depth there, and really just their inconsistent play from linebackers, like, it wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs try to make this like an AFC North, classic game where they just try to pound the rock. But right now they have probably Clyde Edwards-Helaire, slated to start in for Isaiah Pacheco, who, Edwards-Helaire has started this year because of Pacheco's injuries. So if Pacheco doesn't end up going, if he stays in the concussion protocol, we could see Edwards-Helaire, Chase and Burrow's old team at LSU, kind of maybe taking the lion's share of those carries.
Well, for all the complaints we've done over the course of the past 2 shows about the Bengals, their lack of physicality, and the big questions that came about from that game last week against the Steelers, oh boy, are there questions with the Kansas City Chiefs right now. And you think they get it figured out, and then they have a performance like they did against the Raiders this last week where, what was it? Freaking 2 defensive touchdowns in a matter of 7 game seconds, something like that. Yeah. I mean, it was unbelievable what occurred there. And that's against a Raiders team that, they're playing, they're playing tough for Antonio Pierce, the guy who's, stepping in as their interim head coach. But I mean, it's not a great Raiders team. We know that. And we've seen this Chiefs team, they had the stumble against the Lions, who ended up obviously being good the rest of the way. In the opener, there's been a couple of games where you go, man, this just doesn't look like the same team. They are really struggling in a lot of different aspects, and you're seeing some frustration from some of the players there, and a lot of it centers around, quite honestly, wide receiver problems. I mean, there are other issues too, but the wide receiver problems are really, really plaguing the Chiefs right now.
I mean, when you have Antonio Brown tweeting at you, maybe the Chiefs need some AB in their life. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. You got some problems. It's just it's Rashee Rice, who's a very talented rookie, mid-round pick at SMU. I watched him when he played UC in the past couple of years. If he's your best wideout, that's a problem, because it's not just that. It's not just the lack of, Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney obviously not being who they envisioned they'd be. It's like, at best, 75% of what peak Travis Kelce has been over the course of the past decade. I don't know if it's just age. I don't know if it's relationship weight. Whatever the case may be, he doesn't look as quick as he used to be. But
Relationship
still,
weight.
I mean, like he's still a heavily targeted, not check down, but like intermediate option for Mahomes. It's the same move, by the way. It's always like a stop route. He catches the ball facing Mahomes. He does like one little juke to the left and just cuts up field after turning the other way, and it works every time, right? Even if he is only running at like 5 miles an hour nowadays. But yeah, it was in that Raiders game though. It was I think Mahomes legitimately ran. There was a stat that was posted online. He ran like 800 something yards just for scrambling, like extending plays. Like, come on, guys, someone get open, right? I'm holding the ball ridiculous for 5 to 6 seconds, and the offensive line was looking a lot worse. And already, like, it's been Juwan Taylor and Donovan Smith kind of being like average at best tackles who are still penalized a decent amount. So it was already kind of leaking around the edges, and against Max Crosby and the other edge that the Raiders have, he played really well, but it was just Mahomes running for his life because no one could get open, right? I don't even think the scheme necessarily has changed since Eric Bieniemy has left, the former offensive coordinator now with the Washington Commanders. It's just that they've been trying to identify like a Tyreek Hill replacement, which with like the same archetype of athlete, and no one has come remotely close because obviously there is no Tyreek Hill 2.0 or Tyreek Hill clone in the NFL. The Chiefs got rid of him. They were able to win a Super Bowl with like Juju Smith-Schuster as their lead receiver. He's now with the Patriots or whatever. So they just haven't been able to properly fill out that receiver room for the best quarterback in the game, and it's making him press. It's making him force balls into tight windows and overthrowing, and just it's been really, I think, really hard on him trying to adapt to this. And honestly, man, like every game, it's one player on the Chiefs, at least one player, like exploding on the sideline. This team doesn't know how to handle adversity, and it's because of a lack of personnel.
So when you look at this Chiefs team, they are 9-6. They have one more win than that of the Cincinnati Bengals at this point, which is just not only makes this still an intriguing matchup because these teams both have winning records at this point in the season, but also you kind of figured maybe that wouldn't have been the case with the Bengals losing Burrow, obviously. So when you look at the ebbs and flows, I guess I could share this because I'm looking at this screen here, a little Google being my friend here. This is the Chiefs' schedule this year. And I want people to look at this and see the ebbs and flows of what happened here. So they start off 0-1. They barely lose to the Lions, as I mentioned before. Then they rattle off like 5 or 6 wins in a row, right? Against the Jags, against the Bears, against the Jets, against the Vikings, against the Broncos, against the Chargers. And then it gets really weird what's happened to them over the course of – now, granted, you're playing some tough teams in here. The Dolphins, the Broncos were a little more scrappy than I think people thought they would be, particularly in the middle of the season. You have the Eagles there. That's a tough game. So they lose to the Broncos. They get a win from the Dolphins. They lose to the Eagles. They get a big win over the Raiders. Then they lose to the Packers. They lose to the Bills. The one against the Patriots was a little closer than the score would indicate there, 27-17. And then they lose on Christmas Day to the Raiders. So it's been a lot of like pendulum swinging back and forth. So after a hot start where they were 6-1 or something like that, 7-1, something like that. Now they are 9-6, and they have lost a number of games sprinkled through the middle and back part of this schedule here. And they have become a real hit and miss team. And you mentioned a lot of the issues causing that are the wide receivers and, just like you said, maybe Mahomes pressing a little bit because of the wide receiver issues and other elements, that they could rely upon this past half decade that really have not been there the last half of this season.
Something interesting too. I think there are, including week 1's close loss to the Lions before anyone really knew that these issues were a thing. They're 3-4 at Arrowhead this year, which seems ridiculous considering they've gone to the Super Bowl like 3 of the last 4 years, all going through Kansas City, right, as the 1 seed. So they're not slated to be the 1 seed this year. They're not going to have home field advantage. They're still all but certainly going to win the AFC West, but there's a very real chance that they go on the road in the playoffs, and that might actually help them apparently because they're just so wildly inconsistent in front of their own stadium. I look at the issues though that Mahomes specifically is going through, and I look at that compared to what Lou Anarumo has done as the Bengals defense coordinator, it's always been about forcing Mahomes to hold on to the ball for as long as he can. It's always been about, showing pressure but dropping 8 in those specific spots. And obviously when those third downs come into play, then showing a late pressure look and then trying to get him to throw it away. Like the formula has been the same. And part of that is because you've had the personnel in the back end of the secondary to do that. I think safety play has obviously been an extremely critical part of that process. And I don't know how much the process is going to change now that you have 2 more inexperienced guys there. But considering the issues that Mahomes is going through now, the fact that you have Taylor Britt coming back as your number 1 cornerback facing, I guess it's Rashee Rice, but I don't know how much the Chiefs move around the receivers and whatnot. You have the advantage, I think, from the secondary going up against the Chiefs receivers. Your pass rush may not be all the way there, aside from Hendrickson, but if the goal here is to just get Mahomes to hold the ball and force his receivers to win after 5-6 seconds, the Bengals pass rush is going to find him at that point, regardless of the agility that Mahomes has. So I think their issues align up with a good, decent bounce back performance of the Bengals, aside from just their history of limiting Mahomes like they've done.
Yeah, to your point, that's a great breakdown of what Lou Anarumo has traditionally done in these last handful of games. He has done a lot of the contained stuff on the edges, primarily using Sam Hubbard, especially on his side, doing that. But Hendrickson still getting in there for some plays, and then you'd have I think Cam Sample in the AFC Championship game had a pretty good game last year as well. He had a sack, but late, I think early in that game. But look, it's going to take more of that. The Bengals tried to do some of that stuff with Lamar, and Lamar was able to take advantage and make some plays there. And so I'm interested to see what's going to happen here, particularly with the wide receiver issues, because that's kind of the give and take here. The Bengals really relied, and they stepped up huge against Kansas City so many times in those 3 games that they played against each other the last couple of years. Jesse Bates and Von Bell did, but now you've got a different set, and I would assume that the game plan by Lou Anarumo is going to remain the same. So now you have this cat and mouse game of are the Chiefs receivers going to be able to get enough space, hang on to the ball when it's thrown to them, and make enough plays to get past the Bengals? And which team is which from what they showed last week, right? I mean, which was the anomaly, right? Are the Chiefs kind of trending the way that their season has gone, where they're just kind of all over the place? Was it just a bad matchup and the injuries caught up with the Bengals last week, but they're getting potentially a couple of big guys back this week, and they can maybe take advantage of a weaker Chiefs team than we've seen the past couple of weeks? There's a lot of chess match stuff going on in this one.
Yeah, I think the Raiders' defense has been obviously a lot better than we expected. Honestly, the Raiders, whenever they fire their coach, they just get a 50% increase, right? Because the Rich Bisaccia Raiders, they won at the end of the season, and they faced the Bengals, then they gave them their first playoff win, and now it's Antonio Pierce, getting those guys to play their hearts out. So I think the Chiefs are going to look at the Bengals defense as an easier opponent, I think, just from a personnel standpoint. And honestly, just because Mahomes was just getting a ton of cardio out there, I think they want to take it more easy on him. I think they're going to try to run out the Bengals gut this week. And honestly, whenever you face the Bengals in their defensive tackle group, that probably should be the plan, right? Force your linebackers to kind of make plays behind a very bad interior defensive line. Force Sam Hubbard to be Superman, knifing his way from the edge to the inside there. Force their secondary to make those tackles in the open field. Like Pacheco is a guy that can generate explosive runs if he is out there. I don't think Edwards-Helaire is as explosive as Pacheco is in that regard, but I think Edwards-Helaire has more power to him, so he can run up the gut as well. I think they're going to try to be more balanced in this approach and maybe even play in that more AFC North style of football, just to put the pressure off of Mahomes trying to be Superman with the receivers. Because honestly, if the Chiefs want to go anywhere this year, Mahomes is going to just have to play out of his mind and just elevate these guys somehow. But that's obviously easier said than done. So from a Bengals defensive standpoint, they're going to probably start off doing the similar things against Mahomes, but they might have to adjust to just put more guys in the box, and they'll change their scheme a little bit.
So let's do something a little different before we get to predictions and that sort of thing. Let's talk about what you think. It can be a single player if you would like, but a specific position group that you feel is on each side of the ball for the Bengals this week that you feel is especially critical in this one. I guess I would lean, because of the questions there, at interior defensive line for the Bengals. And you're saying ground and pound, maybe a little bit more from the Chiefs than we've traditionally seen. So Zach Carter, Jay Tufele, I think they released Dominique Davis this week, right, after kind of maneuvering him around a little bit. So, Tupo, so obviously we know BJ Hill. He's a solid player, and he comes up with some of the craziest turnovers at times. But they got to have someone next to him, and they got to have someone doing something of note next to him. So I guess I would say for me on defense, maybe it's thanks Captain Obvious, but interior defensive line, primarily, what they're going to do at the nose tackle spot where Reeder was and who's going to step up there.
Yeah. I would say linebackers for a couple reasons. One, I think you just have to have those guys just stay on top of their keys as much as possible and be able to get off blocks, because it's just harder when you don't have 340 pounds of DJ Reeder making your life a little bit easier there. And not just for run defense, though. I think of all the bad things that happened last week, at the very least, Pat Freiermuth didn't necessarily go off. They didn't need him to, because Pickens had 200 freaking yards. But, Freiermuth was a problem a few weeks ago, and I think they had a better plan to stop him. It wasn't just Dax Hill matching up with him all game. I think it was a combination of both Dax Hill and the linebackers kind of, doubling him and just, passing off coverages at that point. And that's going to need to be the same plan against Travis Kelce, because, again, even if he isn't the same athlete that he was, he's still a chain mover, right? He still converts key first downs. He's still able to get some yards after the catch. He's not going to be the guy that takes the top off your defense, but in those short intermediary zones, you need your linebackers and Dax Hill when he's up there to just kind of stay on top of him.
Good call. On offense, I'm going to go, there's a lot of different places I could point to, and a lot of it may depend on, does Jamar Chase play or not? I think in your way, this position group is one that, I look at whether or not Jamar Chase plays and the role that they would play. And that's the running backs, John, because here's the thing. I know it takes a whole group to be able to be effective on the ground. It takes, it takes the offensive line. It takes the scheme. It takes, all that kind of stuff. But when these running backs are at least threatening or have shown the ability to make a big play or two in these games, you look at Jacksonville, you look at Indianapolis, you look at the Minnesota game. You look, Chase Brown had close to 50 total yards against Minnesota. And then, of course, he had the big play against Indianapolis, the screen pass that he took for a touchdown. Jacksonville, he had 92 total yards, and then last week, what was it for him? It was 24 total yards. And then Joe Mixon, the same thing, when he's rattling off the occasional big run, the big play, the physical run, and at least is showing the ability to make a big play here and there. It doesn't have to be every single time he's touching the football, but when he is showing the ability, that allows you to run play action, that allows you to run the bootlegs, that takes pressure off of Jake Browning to have to be Superman throughout an entire game. And, of course, we know if you have the ability to sustain drives, that keeps Patrick Mahomes a little bit off the field more. So, to me, I am looking at the running back group this week that, again, it's not just on them, but it's going to be about their ability to at least have a threatening presence in this game to be able to maintain some offensive balance, because that was not the case last week. And I think we saw how badly that shaped up for the Bengals.
Absolutely. In addition to that, I think Joe Mixon specifically has done a good job of bouncing back from like an off week to just kind of getting back on track. And obviously, again, it's not just him, it's the offensive line, it's the game script, it's all of that, right? Mm-hmm. You don't if you're down a ton, you just can't just force feed him to get up to 25 carries and you magically get a win. That's just not how it works. But I think he's done a good job of stepping up after, maybe some lackluster statistical performances, let's say that. But not just that. I mean, last year's AFC Championship game, or I guess technically this year, calendar year, like he was a non-factor in that game. He was taken off the field in very critical moments for pass protection purposes, and he just couldn't run the ball against the Chiefs defense. I wonder how much of that game is on his mind entering this week, considering how much help Jake Browning needs to just take the weight off of his shoulders, I would expect him to be pretty fired up for this one, considering what happened this past season and what happened last week. But I don't think anything's more important than just Jake Browning just playing within himself and playing more poised and control. I think the Chiefs' defense is by far the best thing about this team. The Bengals have given up the most explosive plays on a defense in the 111. The Chiefs have given up like the fourth or fifth least with like about 70 in terms of just both passing and running. They don't give up a lot of big plays. I think their cornerbacks have played extremely well considering they're not the most experienced and not the most well known. It's a very cheap defense outside of just Chris Jones's contract, which I guess is up after this year. They've just been maximizing a ton of those guys, and Karl Loftus is a great guy off the edge too. So Steve Spagnuolo is having a phenomenal year coordinating that defense. It's obviously very aggressive when it needs to be, and against Jake Browning, like that's a formula for maybe another shaky game from him. He needs to just be smarter with the football, like plain and simple.
Well, there you go. I like that too. So where are you going in this one here? I got to recheck the line here, and I will do that in just a second.
About 7 points, I think.
But it's 7 points. Okay. So how are you feeling on this? Did the Chiefs show you enough last week and sporadically through the middle and back parts of the season that, hey, this is a hyper winnable game, and I think the Bengals will bounce back nicely? Or have the Bengals just had to overcome too much injury-wise and other things going on that going into Arrowhead this time of year seems insurmountable?
Well, it's definitely winnable. Like, I don't think anyone should be afraid of the Chiefs at this point. And that's not disrespectful to, what they've done in the past couple of years. It's not disrespectful to the head coach or the quarterback. It's just factoring in who they are right now. They don't have any legitimate receiving threats outside of a rookie who is good for like 6 catches and 60 yards a game. It's causing bad play from the quarterback. It's causing bad play from the offensive line. It's putting that entire offense in the flux. Their defense is still legit, though. They're still playing at home. They're coming off an embarrassing loss. They don't lose to the Raiders very often. I don't think they've lost to the Raiders in years, right? So they're pissed about that, too. One thing about predicting this game, it has to be a 3-point game, right? It's always a 3-point game against this team. So that's something to keep in mind. It's going to be a defensive battle. I would expect the regular under to hit in this one. I think it's like 44 right now, the over-under. I think it's going to be 2 very aggressive defenses with a lot to prove, specifically the Bengals, coming back from giving up 34 points to Mason Rudolph. I think they still have the personnel to match up with what this Chiefs offense is right now. It's just going to be about whether or not Jake Browning can make the necessary plays within structure to actually put enough points on the board. I really don't know, though. I think we're looking at like a 20-17 Chiefs win, maybe.
2017 Chiefs win. I could definitely see that occurring. You are right about the 7-point spread. Chiefs are 7-point favorites. I definitely see the Bengals at least covering that. I've got a heart and mind fight going on here with this one, John, because in my heart, I like to believe that the Bengals go in there and, once again, just stick it to the Chiefs. And once again, do so on their home turf. I think, unfortunately, a lot of it will reside in if Jamar Chase plays or not, and even if it's on a limited basis on a snap count, that sort of thing. I think just what he does, even though what you look back at the win streak, there was really only one super dominant game, the one against Jacksonville where he, took over that one where I think it was 11 catches and 120 yards and a touchdown and all kinds of different stuff. And then you look, he had a couple of, 80 yards, 60 yards, that sort of thing in the win streak. But there was just in those performances where he didn't have the big gaudy stats, there was just the 1 or 2 catches where you go, not many people on planet Earth could make that play. Not many, or just the fact that he is so good that he's going to make a play, even if it's not all that difficult of a catch. And you saw that against the Vikings 1 or 2 times. You saw that against the Colts 1 or 2 times. And that not being there last week, I think, just really hurt them. So I think, I'm inclined to kind of agree with you. Maybe it's a 17-14 or maybe even upwards of 24-20 type of thing where I would lean Chiefs. But if I think Cam Taylor-Britt, who is trending to come back, that's a big gain. I think if Chase even comes back on a limited basis and even just is a guy on the field commanding attention, I think that this then becomes a game the Bengals sneak away with. I'm a little undecided on where I go because I think Jamar Chase and him playing plays that big of a factor in this game. I think the Bengals would still be able to keep it close if he does not play. But if if he's out there even on a limited basis and they're not even throwing the ball, just commanding attention, I think the Bengals could sneak away with a win here.
And if they do sneak a win, Rob Duncan, we will not be saying Browning head under
Browning
any circumstances. No, let's not. First of all, Browning head, that sounds like a little suggestive. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chase obviously playing is key. We saw firsthand the first game in the Joe Burrow era without Jamar Chase, or at least the first game with both Chase and Burrow on the roster without either of them playing, and it led to a 23-point loss on the road where they got outclassed in every sense of the word. So I think Chase is going to try to fight like hell to play in this one. We just don't know enough at this point. Obviously, if you're listening to this on Friday or Saturday, we already know the answer to that, and maybe our thoughts change a little bit on that. But yeah, it's two quarterbacks that I think in their own respective ways have a lot to kind of go through right now, and they're facing their own adversity. Brownie doesn't really know what his career kind of holds after this year. There's a lot of pressure on Mahomes to just do a lot with maybe not a lot, and he's facing a team that, at least from an all-time standpoint, kind of has his numbers. So a lot on the line on Sunday.
A lot on the line. Well, if you got a score, share it with us. We'll be here just a couple more minutes, but we're going to get out of here. Want to drop the mic and get on out of here, John? Find some final thoughts from you. What do you have?
So about a week ago, I think it was last Thursday, my family has our annual happy hour, and this year we chose to do it at Factory 52, which if you're from Cincinnati, you know that's in the Norwood area. I got there like 5:30, and at 8:30, I had more than enough probably at that point to drink. I didn't black out or anything, but I was a bit tipsy, and we were at this one bar called one brewery called Fretboard, and I was about to leave the bar, and I get a text from James Rapine. He said, "Hey, you just passed me in Fretboard." So I immediately book it back, still inebriated, and I said, "Well, hey, what's up, James? I'm sorry I missed you or whatever." And I remember for the most part what I said, but it didn't come out the way that I wanted to. I wanted to first and foremost congratulate him on all the success that he's had with Cincinnati Bengals Talk, obviously running all Bengals, and now most recently Inside the Reds, which is another Sports Illustrated website that now covers the Reds in the same aspect. So a lot of credit to his success, and he's got a book out now called Enter the Jungle or something like that.
Yep.
It's been on
Very
sale.
impressive
Definitely get
that
it.
he did that. That's awesome. Yeah.
So a great year for James Rapine. I wanted to relay all that, and it kind of came out like, if I can just kind of, I'm just really, really happy for your success. Like you have that drunk voice where you're just kind of like happy or whatever. Like
I love you, man.
It's kind of how it came out, and I wanted it to be a little bit more professional as a colleague. But James is a good guy. He's a good friend. I'm glad I saw him last Thursday. Sorry if I was a little drunk though, James.
Yeah, we got to get them back on the show. We'd love to have them back on. And I got to get myself a copy of that book that he put out. I want to do that. So congratulations to him. Yeah, he does great work, and I know he works extremely hard at his craft and what he does too. So kudos to him and the All Bengals staff, and he and Jake have a great show, of course. So that's a cool story. I still haven't met him. I haven't met either of those guys in person. When I've been out there, I haven't been able to connect with them. I'd like to do that in person sometime. I don't really have as cool of a story as that is. I guess we've talked so much Jamar Chase on this show. I just want to say, and granted, there are 2 games left, and we'll see what happens, but it's been nice to see a bit of a turnaround from T. Higgins the last couple of weeks. He was the hero against the Vikings. Even though last week just absolutely sucked on so many fronts for the Bengals and their offense, he still had a huge play that kind of injected a little bit of life where you go, hey, maybe you get a couple stops here, and if you keep things rolling, maybe you're able to get things going. Of course, that didn't happen, but it's good to see him pick things back up. I know he's had a tough year with a lot of different things going on, and of course, injuries and everything. So I'm happy to see him playing the brand of football that we are accustomed to after kind of enduring a lot of different things here. And as you and I know, you met him in person, and I did the video chat when he was on our show late last year. He's an incredibly affable guy, $1 million smile, does a lot of stuff in the community. And, I think he really likes being a Cincinnati Bengal. So I kind of have a soft spot for him a little bit, but it's good to see him have a nice couple of bounce back games after, being injured and having a couple of struggles here and there.
Hell, I mean, if the Steelers game obviously goes differently, like we'll look back on that 80 yards slant to a touchdown. Like we've never really seen him in that position where he's just got breakaway speed for like 70 yards and he's got to outrace everyone. It was a unique, cool moment for T, which obviously boosted his numbers. But I wrote about this like last week with Chase being out. And these could be the last handful of games with him in the Bengals uniform because we don't know what's going to happen with him in the offseason. It's a very critical time for him and really the future of his career. Like he can elevate himself to the top of the wide receiver free agent market. He could obviously garner more leverage negotiations with the Bengals if he decides to stick around here and whatnot. It's just a very, very crucial time for him after, it's obviously not been the contract year that he's wanted, but none of that matters now. He's had back-to-back really good games, and he can really close the year out on an emphasis and say, yeah, I'm still that dude. So I'm happy for him.
Yeah, and I want to just tack on one quick thing to what we were talking about with the physicality thing in the division. And with his status up in the air with the Bengals, hopefully they figure out a way to make it happen. I still am optimistic that at least a franchise tag thing will happen. Hopefully a long-term deal will be reached. But physicality isn't just, the offensive line play and the defensive line play and hard hits by your linebackers and et cetera, et cetera. Physicality comes in the form of a 6'4" wide receiver who outjumps defensive backs, high points the ball, outmuscles them as well. So I think him and what he has done, he's had some good games against the Steelers and he's had some good games across the board in his career. He's been a very, very good player. I think he brings that physicality and is a key to the Bengals rebounding against the AFC North last year. So I think as they maybe, again, season's not over, so we don't want to go in off-season mode yet, but I think as the Bengals turn their focus on, okay, how do we build this team to get through this division? I think T. Higgins is a big part of that plan with his size and his skill set and what he does. I think that's part of it.
I mean, we're seeing firsthand, if you're watching any Falcons games or seeing any highlights, how much of an impact a guy like Jesse Bates can have and just kind of help turn around the team. Like T. Higgins is always going to be part of, I think, a winning team. Like he's always going to be impactful in generating wins. Like he may not be the exact receiver that Jamar Chase is, but I think if he gets the chance to get a life-changing contract in the open market, he's going to have no trouble doing that, just like Jesse Bates had no trouble finding a new home in Atlanta. So it's going to be a very intense next couple months for him, his agency, and obviously the Bengals front office as they try to make something work. But I think the Bengals would love nothing more than just to keep him around and the impact that he makes.
Thank you, T. Brookie. Appreciate that. And as Rob Duncan said, don't forget to vote for Ted Karras for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. I think he's on top of the fan voting portion at this point. So continue that. And obviously a testament to everything he does with the Cincy hat and the village of Marici, et cetera. So great guy for sure. Thanks everybody for tuning in again. If you are new here, or if you haven't just done it yet, please click the show icon underneath the Cincy Jungle icon on our wallpaper there on the YouTube channel to subscribe. Click the subscribe button and then click the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. Give us a thumbs up on our videos as you scroll through the catalog. We've got all kinds of stuff, including this show is a staple, some fun interviews with current former Bengals players and all kinds of people who cover the team and, cover the opposition. So go check out all that stuff. And then, of course, if you like what we do, you can also subscribe through your favorite audio streamer on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel with a slate of a lot of other great shows. Keep it to cincyjungle.com for all your news, opinions, analysis, your podcast. And, of course, go check out what John is doing at A to Z Sports as well. He's killing it over there with the AFC North and Bengals coverage. John, I hope we are talking about the Bengals remaining alive by virtue of a win against the Kansas City Chiefs, which are really becoming a, dare I say, an unlikable team, not only from a Bengals perspective, but maybe just in general.
You've been really holding back on this show. I feel like the opinion is
more. I'm heated.
Yeah. Happy New Year, guys. We'll see you in 2024.
Happy New Year.